The restaurant pulsed with quiet luxury. The kind of place where money didn't just speak, it whispered. Crystal glasses sparkled beneath chandeliers. Conversations were soft, rehearsed, and heavy with self-importance. At the far end of the room, Elena Brooks balanced a tray of steaming cups, her back straight, her movements careful, invisible by habit. Years in fine dining had taught her one rule: serve perfectly, exist quietly. Then it happened. A man's arm shot out suddenly, his elbow striking the edge of her tray. The word came like a slap. Useless. Hot coffee splashed across Elena's white uniform. Pain burned her skin. The man didn't even look at her. He simply brushed droplets off his designer sleeve, the light catching on his diamond watch. "Clean this," he said, as if she were part of the floor. Elena froze. Every eye in the restaurant turned. The room grew still, balanced between humiliation and silence. Then his phone rang. Without apology, the businessman turned away and answered, and his tone transformed instantly. His harshness melted into smooth, practiced Mandarin. A fluent stream of words poured out, confident and effortless. Even Elena, who spoke 5 languages, felt startled by the switch. But then the call crackled and broke. "Worthless connection," he muttered, stabbing at the screen. Something inside her shifted. The same quiet strength that had carried her through double shifts and endless rejection rose in her chest. She stepped forward slightly. Her voice calm. "Sir, if you move 3 steps closer to the window, your signal will improve. The steel framing interferes with reception here." In flawless Mandarin, every fork stopped mid-air. The sound vanished from the room. The man's head turned sharply. He stared at her as if the world had tilted, and then her words worked. The call cleared instantly. From the phone came the voice of the confused caller. "Who was that?" "She's correct about the signal." Elena's heart pounded, but her face stayed steady. "Excuse me, sir," she said in English now, her tone professional again. "I'll bring fresh napkins." But for the first time, the man didn't look through her. He looked at her. Before dawn, 5:15 a.m., Elena's alarm shattered the dark. She silenced it quickly so her daughter wouldn't wake. The apartment was small, walls painted with effort instead of money. On the fridge, a calendar was filled edge to edge. Work shifts, language deadlines, overdue bills. No space for rest. In the bathroom mirror, Elena practiced her smile. Professional, pleasant, invisible. The kind of smile that earned tips without attention. "Mama?" A sleepy voice came from the door. 10-year-old Maya rubbed her eyes, curls wild from sleep. "Good morning, sunshine," Elena said softly, switching to Mandarin. "Zhao Shang Hao." It was their morning ritual, a tiny rebellion against a world that often underestimated them both. Maya smiled. "French test today," she mumbled. "Then conjugate while you brush," Elena said with a wink, already slicing bread. They practiced verbs between bites of toast, laughed between vocabulary drills. On the counter, Elena's phone blinked with a new message. She didn't need to open it. The subject line said enough. "Thank you for your interest. We've chosen a candidate with formal credentials. Her 5th rejection this month." Maya caught her mother's frown. "You'll get a better client, Mama." Elena smiled, hiding the sting. "We're doing just fine." But the rent notice tucked in her drawer said otherwise. Still, she tied her apron, kissed Maya's forehead, and repeated their morning mantra. "Your mind is borderless, and my worth isn't decided by someone else's vision," Maya finished. Her voice bright. They said it every day, like armor. At the restaurant, Elena clocked in, her steps steady, her uniform spotless. The manager, Mr. Collins, didn't look up from his tablet. "You're on Section 6 today." The Lynn party canceled. Elena's chest tightened. Section 6 meant fewer tips, fewer chances. "I've been serving them for years," she said carefully. "They usually request me." Collins looked up at last. His smile was thin. "They've asked for Lily this time. She better fits the aesthetic." Lily, 22, blonde and freshly hired, gave an apologetic shrug. Elena just nodded. "Of course, sir." In the kitchen, Chef Antoine greeted her in French. "Section 6 again?" "Seems so," he frowned. "You deserve better, Elena." She smiled faintly. "Deserve doesn't pay rent, chef." Then, pulling her hair into a tight knot, she added quietly, "Let's get through today." The restaurant opened at 11:30 a.m., sharp, polished perfection on display. Elena took her position near the windows. where sunlight spilled through glass like liquid gold. She didn't yet know that in less than an hour, her life would change forever. Andrew Lane stepped out of his black sedan, phone already pressed to his ear, his mind spinning with numbers and negotiations. To most people, a lunch at the Grand Elm was an event. For him, it was strategy disguised as luxury. Every gesture, every word was part of a performance he'd perfected, a show of power that always ended in profit. His assistant hurried behind him, reading updates from her tablet. "The investors from Shanghai are arriving at noon, sir. They appreciated the hotel suite upgrades." Andrew nodded, barely listening. "They'll appreciate them more once they sign the deal." $20 million rested on this meeting. He didn't believe in luck, only preparation and leverage. Inside, the restaurant manager greeted him with exaggerated warmth. "Mr. Lane, welcome back. Your usual table is ready." "Good," Andrew said. "And the service?" "Our most discreet server. She's excellent." Andrew didn't care who served him, only that his glass stayed full and no one interrupted his business. He scanned the room as he walked to his table. Polished marble, gold accents, quiet music. The air smelled of confidence and cooked ambition. He loosened his tie slightly and sat, opening his tablet. Across the room, Elena moved through her section with practiced rhythm. Every motion efficient, silent. She noticed the man as soon as he entered, the kind who wore confidence like armor. His watch alone could pay her rent for a year. She didn't need to know his name to recognize his type. Powerful, impatient, and certain the world bent for him. Her timing was perfect, as always. 90 seconds after seating. Approach from the right. Offer water, no questions. Present the wine list with a polite smile. "Good afternoon, sir," she said softly. "Would you like—" The sentence never finished. Andrew shifted to reach his phone and his elbow collided hard with her tray. The crystal pitcher tilted. Water spilled, coffee splattered, a plate crashed to the floor. He shot up from his chair, voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Are you blind?" "You ruined my briefcase." Elena's face flushed, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for napkins. "I'm very sorry, sir. I'll clean this immediately." "Just get it done," he snapped, already answering his ringing phone. His tone flipped instantly, now smooth, respectful, persuasive. Mandarin flowed from his lips as if he were a different man. Elena heard every word. His voice lowering, apologizing for a confusion in the schedule, promising adjustments. But the signal began to falter. The call crackled. He frowned, tapping the phone. "This connection is worthless," he muttered. Elena glanced up. "Sir?" she said in fluent, steady Mandarin. "If you step 3 feet closer to the window, the signal will improve. The steel structure here causes interference." Her words silenced the restaurant. Conversations froze. Someone's fork hovered midair. Andrew's head turned sharply. He stared at her as though seeing her for the first time. He stepped toward the window as she'd said, and the call cleared instantly. On the other end, a voice spoke in surprise. "Who was that?" "She's correct. We can hear you clearly now." Andrew looked at her, eyes narrowing, not in anger this time, but curiosity. When he ended the call, he didn't sit down immediately. "Your Mandarin," he said. "That's not beginner's pronunciation. Northern dialect, yes?" "Yes, sir," she said evenly. "Would you prefer still or sparkling water?" The manager appeared beside her in seconds, his nervous smile too wide. "Mr. Lane, I deeply apologize. If you'd like another server—" "No," Andrew interrupted. "She stays." The words rippled through the room. Elena bowed slightly, masking the rush of emotion in her chest. She'd broken a rule today, the rule of invisibility. "How many languages do you speak?" Andrew asked, his tone different now. 5 fluently, she said quietly. "English, Mandarin, Cantonese, French, and Spanish." He nodded slowly, intrigued. "Impressive." Elena retreated to the kitchen to compose herself. Chef Antoine raised an eyebrow. "You're trending out there." "What happened?" "Nothing," she said, picking up a new tray. "Just a spill. But it wasn't nothing. It was the beginning of something neither of them could yet name." Back in the dining area, Andrew couldn't stop glancing toward her. When his investors arrived, a trio of men in sharp suits, the air changed again. They spoke English for formality, Mandarin among themselves. And each time they did, Andrew's eyes flickered to Elena, as if testing whether she understood. She never reacted, though she caught every word. When one of the investors asked in Mandarin, "Who is your interpreter?" Andrew smiled faintly. She's part of the team. It wasn't true, but somehow it felt right to say. Throughout lunch, Elena's quiet efficiency filled the space with calm control. She caught details no one else noticed, a missed term in translation, a cultural nuance lost in phrasing, and subtly corrected them through tone, through timing, through presence. 2 hours later, when the investors left smiling, Andrew stayed behind. He sat in silence, fingers tapping the table. "How long have you worked here?" he asked finally. 5 years, she said. "Before that I did freelance translation." "Freelance?" His brow lifted. "No degree?" "I completed 2 years of college before my mother's illness," she answered. "Since then I've worked. Reliable income is important when you're raising a child alone." Something in his expression softened. "My company's expanding into Asia. We need someone who understands both language and culture." "You'd fit perfectly," Elena blinked. "You're offering me a job?" "An interview," he corrected, handing her a business card. "Tomorrow, 9 a.m. As she tucked it into her pocket, her manager appeared again, voice sharp. "If you're done, Section 6 needs resetting." Elena nodded and returned to work. The card pressed against her palm like a promise she didn't dare believe. That night, after the restaurant closed, her friend Rosa leaned against the counter. "He offered you a job? Come on, Elena, that sounds too good to be true." "It's just an interview," Elena said softly. "But what if it isn't?" Rosa studied her. "People like him don't notice people like us. Be careful." Elena slipped the card into her wallet, the embossed letters glinting under the fluorescent light. "Maybe that's the point," she said quietly. "Maybe it's time someone did." Outside, cold wind swept through the city streets. She pulled her coat tight and looked at the skyline. The buildings glittered like unreachable stars, but for the first time in years, one didn't feel so far away. The bus came. She stepped inside, card still warm in her hand, unaware that tomorrow would rewrite every rule she'd ever lived by. The morning came cold and trembling with possibility. Elena woke before her alarm, her body wired with both fear and determination. The city outside was still half asleep, streetlights blinking against the pale dawn. She stood before her mirror, staring at the reflection that barely felt like her own. The navy blazer she'd ironed the night before was the best she owned. A relic from her freelance days when she'd still believed opportunity could be earned through effort alone. She fastened the last button, whispered to her reflection, "You belong in every room you enter," and left before her doubt could argue back. The Lewin Tower loomed ahead, 40 floors of glass and ambition slicing into the sky. Inside, marble floors gleamed beneath her careful steps. Every sound echoed, heels clicking, polite voices, phones ringing. The air smelled faintly of wealth and coffee. "I have an appointment with Mr. Lane," she said at the security desk. Her voice steady, though her hands trembled around the ID card. The guard nodded, scrolling through his screen. "9th floor, executive suite." "Good luck, Miss Brooks." In the elevator, Elena's heart thudded like a drum. She rehearsed her introduction silently, breathing slow, remembering Maya's morning whisper. "You've got this, Mama." When the doors opened, a poised woman greeted her. "Mr. Lane will see you now." Andrew stood by the window, sunlight spilling over his suit. He turned as she entered, studying her in silence for a moment. "Thank you for coming." "Thank you for the opportunity," Elena replied, keeping her voice calm. He gestured toward the chair across from his desk. "I've reviewed your resume. Self-taught in multiple languages. You've worked in translation for years, but without a formal degree." "Yes, sir. My mother was a linguist. I learned early, continued independently." He switched to Mandarin, suddenly testing. "Translate this technical passage for me. Quantum computing, semiconductor specifications." Elena didn't hesitate. Her response flowed naturally, precise and confident. Then he shifted to Cantonese. "Explain the cultural meaning of gift-giving during negotiations in Hong Kong." She answered fluidly, adding small cultural nuances. How timing mattered more than price. How hierarchy shaped the act itself. Andrew nodded, intrigued. Then he tried Spanish. Then French. Then Japanese. For 20 minutes he switched between languages like a chess player moving pieces, and every time, she matched him. No hesitation. No falter. Finally, he leaned back, switching to English again. "Your technical vocabulary exceeds most candidates we've hired, even those with advanced degrees." "Experience is its own education," she said quietly. He smiled faintly. The position pays $75,000 a year. Elena met his gaze. The market rate for a multilingual consultant with my skills is $95,000, plus benefits. A beat of silence. Then something shifted in his eyes. Surprise first, then respect. You came prepared, he said. I value my time, Mr. Lane. And I value what I bring. He nodded slowly. As you should. Let me speak with HR. She left the office walking carefully, heart pounding so loud it echoed in her ears. On the elevator ride down, she almost laughed from disbelief. Back in her apartment, Maya was doing homework at the kitchen table. How was it, Mama? I think it went well, Elena said, setting her purse down. But we'll see. Did he see you? Maya asked simply. Elena paused. Yes, I think for once someone actually did. That night her phone buzzed. An unknown number. She hesitated before answering. Miss Brooks, Andrew Lane here. I've reconsidered your compensation request. $95,000 full benefits, performance bonuses. If you accept, we'll prepare your contract tomorrow. For a long moment, Elena couldn't speak. Then she found her voice. I accept. Thank you, Mr. Lane. When the call ended, she sat in silence. The city glowed outside her window, endless and alive. She whispered into the quiet. No turning back now. The next morning, she stood in front of the Lewin Tower again, but this time she wasn't a visitor. Her ID badge hung against her blazer. The words Elena Brooks, a cultural consultant, printed beneath her name. Inside, the receptionist greeted her with a bright smile. Welcome aboard, Miss Brooks. Mr. Lane asked to see you once you're settled. Her new office wasn't grand, but it had a door, a desk, and her name on a plaque. For the first time, she had a space of her own. On the desk sat a small green plant with a card. Growth begins when you're planted in the right place. The words nearly brought tears to her eyes. She texted Maya a photo. Her daughter's reply came seconds later. Crush it, Mama, you earned this. At 10 sharp, she met with Andrew again. They discussed the company's expansion into East Asia, contracts, translations, and negotiations. Every word mattered, every suggestion she gave received with new respect. When the meeting ended, Andrew paused by the door. You did well today. Thank you, sir. Not, sir, he said. Andrew is fine. As he walked away, Elena realized the balance between them had quietly shifted again. By the end of her first week, her work was already changing the tone of meetings. Her translations didn't just transfer words, they carried respect, culture, understanding. Deals that had stalled for months suddenly moved forward. 2 weeks later, Andrew stood at the head of the conference table announcing, the Shanghai contract is finalized. Miss Brooks's adjustment saved us weeks of negotiation. Polite applause followed, but Elena only smiled faintly. She wasn't chasing recognition. She was proving something, to herself, to Maya, to every room that had overlooked her. As she gathered her notes, Andrew stopped her at the door. Your work's being noticed. Not just by me. The partners in Shanghai mentioned you by name. I'm glad to be of help, she said, keeping her tone professional. Tell me, Elena, he said after a pause, why weren't you already doing this kind of work? Because opportunities depend on who sees your worth, she answered quietly. And who doesn't? For a moment he said nothing. Then he nodded, something thoughtful in his eyes. He didn't know it yet, but that sentence would stay with him for a long time. The conference room buzzed with the low hum of conversation and the sound of papers being shuffled. It was quarterly review day and tension lingered beneath the polite smiles. Andrew stood at the head of the table, reviewing slides while Elena sat quietly near the corner, her notepad ready. She had learned to observe first, speak second. It was a skill that once kept her invisible. Now it made people listen when she did speak. Excellent progress on the Asia-Pacific expansion, the CFO Richard Vaughn announced, clicking to the next slide. Revenue exceeded projections by 17%. Andrew gestured toward her. Credit goes to Elena Brooks. Her insight changed the tone of our communication entirely. Elena kept her expression composed, though a spark of pride lit inside her chest. Before she could respond, Richard smiled tightly. Quite the story, isn't it? From serving tables to saving multi-million-dollar deals in less than 2 months. The words floated across the room like perfume, pleasant on the surface, but laced with poison. A few executives chuckled. Elena simply straightened her spine. Results speak louder than resumes. Andrew said flatly, shutting down the laughter. Richard nodded, unbothered. Of course. Just remarkable, that's all. Most of our team came from Stanford and Wharton. But sometimes talent comes from unexpected places. Unexpected places. The phrase hung like a backhanded compliment. Elena met his gaze calmly. Talent doesn't always announce itself, Mr. Vaughn. Sometimes it waits to be recognized. A faint murmur rippled through the room. Andrew smiled, proud. After the meeting, Diane, the head of international relations, caught up with Elena in the hallway. Ignore them, she whispered. Old guard. They'll come around. I've spent a lifetime earning space in rooms that weren't built for me, Elena said softly. This is no different. But it was different because this time she had power. Later that week, an email from Victor Chen, head of product development, landed in her inbox. His tone was polite, but the subtext was sharp. Please review the attached specifications before tomorrow's meeting. Expecting your unique perspective. Unique perspective. Another carefully packaged dismissal. She opened the file, eyebrows lifting. The document was dense with technical jargon. Numbers, tolerance levels, diagrams. The kind of content meant to intimidate. She read it 3 times. Then she began typing. 3 hours later, she sent back the revised draft, filled with annotated corrections and explanations of cultural implications that could change how clients interpreted the data. She ended her email with one calm line. Please let me know if any points need clarification. The next morning, no one questioned her expertise again, but peace never lasted long. Andrew appeared at her office door, tension etched into his face. We have a problem, he said. The Osaka deal. It's falling apart. What happened? Apparently, they felt insulted by the proposal Victor presented while you were out yesterday. Elena's stomach tightened. She'd taken that morning off for Maya's school ceremony, the first time she'd missed a meeting since being hired. They're saying the specifications were disrespectfully low, Andrew continued. They're threatening to walk, she frowned. That sounds cultural, not technical. I said the same thing, he replied. But the others disagree. There's an emergency meeting in 20 minutes. Should I be there? He hesitated. It's executives only. She nodded even as frustration burned beneath her calm exterior. Then let me help from here. Send me the documents. When he left, she pulled up the files, reading fast. The issue was obvious. In Japanese business culture, presenting the minimum viable specification implied laziness, a belief that the client would accept mediocrity. To them, it was an insult. She wrote her analysis and emailed it to Andrew, detailing exactly how to reframe the conversation. Then she waited. No reply. Through her glass door, she watched the executives rush toward the conference room. She wasn't invited. Again. Her phone buzzed. A text from Maya. I'm so glad you came today, Mama. My teacher said my project was the best. Elena smiled faintly. Pride and anxiety tangled in her chest. One world reminding her of what mattered, the other threatening to erase what she'd built. Minutes later, Andrew's assistant called. The Osaka team wants to resume the call. They specifically requested their original contact. Elena's pulse quickened. Me? Yes. Mr. Lane asked if you could join the conference immediately. She stood outside the meeting room, the muffled sound of raised voices spilling through the door. We can't redo the proposal in 15 minutes, Victor barked. Then prepare for a $30 million loss, Richard snapped. Elena thought of Maya's smile that morning. The new apartment she'd just applied for. The promise she'd made to herself not to shrink again. She took a deep breath and pushed open the door. Every head turned. Andrew looked relieved. Victor did not. Miss Brooks, Richard said sharply. This is a closed meeting. I know why the Osaka team is upset, Elena said. And it's not about specifications. Victor rolled his eyes. I've handled Asian markets for years. Then you should know, she interrupted, that presenting minimum standards in Japan implies you expect your partners to settle for less. They're not rejecting our technology. They're rejecting our attitude. Silence filled the room. They need to see our respect, she continued. We should lead with optimal performance data, not minimal requirements. Excellence, not sufficiency. Andrew studied her. You're certain? I am. She's not qualified to lead a $30 million negotiation, Victor snapped. She's a waitress, for God's sake. The room froze. Elena met his glare. I was a waitress. One who speaks 5 languages and understands the cultures you claim to manage. The question isn't whether my past disqualifies me. It's whether your prejudice is worth $30 million. The conference phone rang, sharp and decisive. Andrew looked at her. Your call. Her heartbeat steadied. She took the seat at the head of the table. Moshi Moshi, she began in warm, flawless Japanese. Thank you for your patience. The tension in the room shifted immediately. As the Osaka executives voiced their concerns, she listened closely, responding with grace and precision. Your attention to excellence honors us, she said in Japanese. Our documents were meant to show transparency, not limitation. Allow me to share the full capability of our system. She outlined the superior performance levels, explaining how their design exceeded industry standards by 40%. With each exchange, the tone softened. Questions turned collaborative. By the end of the call, the Osaka team requested an accelerated partnership timeline. Trust restored. When the call ended, silence held the room again. Andrew broke it first. That, he said quietly, is why expertise matters more than pedigree. Diane smiled. And why listening to the right people is good business. Elena stood, gathering her notes with calm hands. Shall I prepare the revised proposal? Do it, Andrew said. And Elena, thank you. She only nodded, though her chest ached with relief. She'd walked into that room as an outsider. She'd left it as a force. For 3 days and nights, the office lights on the 29th floor never dimmed. Elena lived on coffee and determination, rewriting the Osaka proposal line by line until it breathed with understanding instead of arrogance. She checked translations, adjusted phrasing, added context, and aligned tone. Her notes filled pages, small, clear handwriting packed with empathy disguised as precision. At midnight on the 3rd night, the building was nearly silent. She sat alone, eyes burning, the city lights glittering below like another universe entirely. Her phone buzzed. A message from Rosa. Maya's asleep. She told me to tell you ganbatte. That means good luck, right? Elena smiled, exhausted but proud. It means do your best, she texted back. Tell her I am. Moments later, Andrew walked in carrying 2 steaming cups of coffee. You're still here, he said softly, setting one on her desk. So are you, he chuckled. Fair point. The Osaka team wants a final call at 1 in the morning. Then let's make it count. They joined the meeting from the conference room. The Japanese executives greeted her warmly this time. Every detail mattered. The words she chose, the rhythm of her speech, the respectful silences she allowed to linger. When the Osaka CEO joined unexpectedly, she shifted her phrasing to suit his formal dialect, honoring his age and title. 2 hours later, when the call ended, Andrew turned to her with a rare, unguarded smile. You just saved a partnership worth more than most people make in a lifetime. Elena looked at the quiet city beyond the glass. We saved it, she said. No, he replied gently. You did. The next morning, sunlight spilled across her desk. Andrew appeared at her doorway again, holding a folder. It's official, he said. Contract signed. The legal team said it's the smoothest international agreement they've ever processed. That's good news. He hesitated before speaking again. I owe you an apology. Elena looked up. For what? For that first day, at the restaurant. I treated you like you didn't exist, like your worth was tied to a uniform. I spilled that coffee, not you. And worse, I nearly overlooked someone extraordinary because I couldn't see past my own blindness. She let the words settle, then said quietly, Most people don't see until they're forced to. The question is what they do after. I intend to do better, he said simply. Next week is our executive review. I'm proposing a new role, Vice President of Global Communication and Cultural Strategy. You'd be perfect for it. Her breath caught. That's a major position. It's the right one. You've already been doing the work. You just haven't had the title. He started to leave, then paused. Your daughter's name is Maya, right? How's she adjusting to your schedule? She's proud, Elena said softly. It matters what children see possible. He nodded, understanding flickering in his eyes. My father cleaned the university floors where I earned my MBA. I used to think his invisibility taught me ambition, but maybe it was meant to teach me perspective. Their eyes met, a brief moment of shared recognition. Then he left her office, closing the door quietly behind him. A week later, the company auditorium filled with hundreds of employees for the quarterly meeting. Andrew stood on stage reviewing results and growth charts, his tone steady and practiced. Then he paused, eyes scanning the audience. "Before we close," he said, "I want to acknowledge someone whose work has changed this company in ways numbers alone can't measure." The screen behind him lit up with images of the Osaka contract. Murmurs spread through the crowd. 3 weeks ago, Andrew continued, a $30 million deal was collapsing due to cultural misunderstanding. One person recognized the real issue and restored trust where it had been lost. That insight not only saved the partnership but deepened it. He turned toward her. "Elena Brooks, please join me on stage." Applause rose like a wave as she walked forward. Each step measured, her heart pounding. She stood beside him, looking out at a sea of faces that finally saw her. "This story reminds us," Andrew said, "that talent often hides in plain sight." Miss Brooks joined us only weeks ago from a world far removed from this one. Her perspective reshaped our global strategy and reminded us that true intelligence isn't limited by background. It's amplified by experience. The applause grew louder. Some faces looked proud, others thoughtful. Even the skeptics from earlier clapped now, their hesitation replaced with respect. Elena took the microphone. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady. "I'm honored to accept this role. But this moment isn't just about me. It's about every person who's been overlooked because someone couldn't see their light. Sometimes all it takes is one chance, one open door to prove what's been there all along." When she finished, the standing ovation rolled through the room. Diane smiled from the front row, eyes shining. Even Victor nodded faintly, silent but humbled. Across town, Rosa wiped down the bar at the restaurant where Elena once worked. The local news played quietly on the television above the counter. She froze when the anchor spoke. Lewin Technologies appoints new vice president after groundbreaking international deal. Former restaurant server leads company's global communications strategy. Rosa laughed softly, shaking her head. "You did it, girl." A young waiter looked up. "You knew her?" "She trained me," Rosa said proudly. "Told me to always look people in the eye even when they don't look back." At a nearby table, the restaurant's manager glanced up from his clipboard and saw Elena's photograph on the screen. The color drained from his face. Meanwhile, miles away in the maintenance department of Lewin Tower, a man named Luis scrolled through the same article on his lunch break. He was a janitor, an immigrant engineer whose degree had never been recognized here. The picture of Elena in her suit and badge made something shift inside him. "That's the VP who says good morning in Spanish," his coworker said. Luis nodded slowly. "Yes, and I think she means it." That afternoon, he visited HR to ask about the company's internal education program. Weeks passed and the ripple spread. People started looking at one another differently, seeing, not just glancing, listening, not just hearing. 3 months later, sunlight poured into Elena's new apartment. Maya stood on a stool, lining her books neatly along the shelf. Outside, a small park replaced the old view of brick walls. "Mama," Maya said, "look, I can see the trees from my desk." Elena smiled. "That's because we finally have a window that looks toward the sky." On the desk sat a framed photo of them at the city's language fair, Maya clutching a trophy, Elena beaming beside her. "Can you help me write my thank you note to Mr. Lane in Japanese?" Maya asked. Elena nodded, guiding her daughter's careful brushstrokes. "When I was your age, people asked why I learned so many languages," she said softly. "What did you tell them?" "That languages are bridges to worlds others can't see. But I've realized something since then." "What's that?" "I thought learning those languages would make people see me. But really, they help me see myself." Maya looked up, smiling. "And now everyone sees you too." Elena kissed the top of her daughter's head. "Now they do." Later that year, Andrew stood on a stage at the International Business Conference, the room filled with leaders and investors. "6 months ago," he began, "I learned something about leadership. A woman I once dismissed saved my company $30 million because she possessed the skill I failed to notice. Since then, we've launched an initiative to find hidden talent within our walls. We've discovered engineers working in maintenance, designers in accounting, professors in our call center. Innovation has increased by 40%, retention by 35%, all because we learned to look." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "The most expensive mistake a company can make isn't a financial one. It's the blindness that keeps brilliance unseen." His gaze drifted to the front row where Elena sat listening. The future belongs to those who see what others overlook, he said quietly. So I ask you, who in your world deserves to be seen? As the audience rose in applause, Elena's eyes glistened. She didn't need the spotlight anymore. She had built something bigger than recognition. She had changed how people saw one another. And somewhere, in a quiet apartment overlooking a park, Maya studied under the soft afternoon light, growing up in a world where visibility wasn't a privilege, but a birthright, because her mother had refused to stay invisible. The applause from the conference still echoed in Elena's mind long after the event had ended. As the crowd dispersed, she lingered near the exit, watching people shake hands and trade ideas. There was a new energy in the air, one that carried her name quietly through conversations she couldn't hear but could feel. Andrew approached her, loosening his tie slightly, the formal composure replaced by genuine relief. You did well today, he said. You reminded everyone why this company exists at all. Elena smiled faintly. To build technology? No, he said. To build bridges. The technology just helps us get there. They walked together toward the lobby. The sun had dipped low outside, staining the windows with orange light. Andrew stopped before the elevator. You know, he said, I used to think leadership was about control. Turns out it's about learning when to listen. Elena looked at him, her voice quiet but firm. Then you've learned what most never do. The elevator doors opened, but neither moved for a moment. There was mutual respect there now, something steady and human. That night, Elena took the long route home. The city glowed differently these days, not as something distant, but as something she belonged to. She walked past the Grand Elm, the restaurant where her story had begun. Through the glass, she saw new servers moving gracefully between tables. One of them dropped a tray. The manager's voice rose sharply, irritation snapping through the air. Elena stepped closer, watching. Before she could intervene, another server placed a reassuring hand on the girl's shoulder, quietly helping her clean the mess. Their eyes met briefly through the window. Elena smiled. Not all change needed headlines. Sometimes it began with one person deciding to be kind. When she reached her apartment, Maya was already at the door, waiting. Guess what? Her daughter said, practically bouncing. My teacher asked me to help with the school's new language club. I get to teach Mandarin to the younger kids. Elena knelt, laughter bubbling up. That's wonderful, sweetheart. Maya hugged her tightly. I told them it's because languages help people understand each other. Like you said, Elena felt something warm and steady settle in her chest. You're already wiser than I was at your age. The next morning began like any other. Coffee, emails, quiet music. But by mid-afternoon, Andrew called an emergency meeting. The press wants an interview, he said. They're calling our company a case study for inclusive innovation. Elena sat across from him, pen tapping softly against her notebook. That's good news, isn't it? He nodded. It is. But they don't want me for the interview. She frowned. Then who? You, he said simply. They want to hear the story from the woman who lived it. Her breath caught. Me? You've earned this, he said. You're not a symbol, Elena. You're proof. Later that week, she stood beneath bright studio lights, microphone clipped to her jacket. The interviewer smiled warmly. Miss Brooks, your story has inspired thousands. You went from a restaurant server to vice president of a global company in less than a year. What does that journey mean to you? Elena took a slow breath. It means I stopped waiting for someone else to open the door. I realized I could build my own. And once I did, I kept it open for everyone coming after me. The interviewer leaned in. And what would you say to people who feel unseen right now? She looked into the camera, her voice calm and sure. Being unseen doesn't mean you lack worth. It means the world hasn't learned to look properly yet. But your value doesn't depend on their sight. Keep learning. Keep showing up. One day someone will finally see you, and when they do, everything changes. When the segment aired, messages flooded in from around the world. From waiters, teachers, nurses, immigrants, dreamers. People who had been told to stay quiet, now writing to say they wouldn't anymore. Weeks later, at the company's end-of-year celebration, Andrew handed her a small box wrapped in silver paper. Inside was a pendant, 2 interlocking circles. For connection, he said. For everything you've built. She looked at the gift, then at him. Thank you. For seeing what I could do, he smiled. You made it impossible not to. That night, as the event wound down, Elena slipped out to the balcony. The city stretched beneath her, pulsing with light. The wind caught her hair as she looked out at the skyline she had once only served beneath. Her phone buzzed. A text from Maya. Mama, when I grow up, I want to do something that changes the world too. Elena typed back. You already are. She pocketed the phone, took one last look at the city and smiled, the quiet, knowing smile of someone who had fought to be seen and, in doing so, taught others how to look. The lights below blurred slightly like stars reflected in moving water. Somewhere out there another woman was finishing a long shift. Another man was doubting his worth. Another child was dreaming of more. And somewhere, because of her story, they might believe they could reach it. The elevator doors behind her opened, spilling soft light across the balcony. Andrew's voice carried gently through the night. Come on, Elena, we've got another meeting tomorrow. Tokyo wants your input again. She laughed softly, turning toward the doors. Then I'd better rest. And as they walked back inside, the city glowed brighter, alive with the invisible brilliance of people finally being seen.